Well, it's that time of the week again. Here we are, another one. Not another one. It's a Shoal Weekly podcast. Still doing season 2, according to last week, and we are back with episode 2 of this special festival, Shoal Britannia, which Charlie has put some amazing films celebrating the best of the British Film Institute together for you all at home. I hope you've been following along. We are posting the lineup on Instagram as we go along. So do make sure you are following along on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter for all of those weekly updates. Drop us a like as well. Hit the notification bell. We always appreciate the support. This festival will be the end of season 2, but if you do have any films that you want us to break down going into season 3 at the start of August, then please pop a comment on any of our socials or in the YouTube comments, and we'll be sure to get it on the list. Last week, we did look at This Is England, I, Daniel Blake, A Hard Day's Night, which is a musical by the Beatles from 1964. And then we also did Peterloo as well, which was about obviously the very famous, but as we came to the conclusion of, highly underspoken about, if that's even a word, the massacre that happened in Manchester. Ben was quite enthusiastic about the history behind that. So this week we are mixing it up a little bit, less depressing. We do have Skyfall from 2012. Everyone knows Skyfall, really great Bond film. Very excited to talk about that. And then we're taking it back to 1949 with a classic Ealing comedy, Kind Hearts and Coronets, which Charlie and I are quite familiar with. It's one that we studied quite closely, so it'd be nice trip down memory lane for that one. And then we're rounding things off at the end of the episode with Hamlet. So that's going to be the 2009 Royal Shakespeare Company production of Hamlet. So kind of a weird hybrid blend of theatre and film. So
it has a cameo appearance from Doctor Who as well.
It does, yeah. We won't tell you which one though. We'll you've got 13 to choose from. So, but before we get into our Shoal Britannia films, and I know you were very anxious to talk about. Well, not anxious. What's the word?
Excited.
You were itching to talk about Clarkson's farm last week, but we.
Yes, last week. Yeah. Wink.
So yeah, I mean, why don't you give us a bit of a rundown of Clarkson's farm, because I know you've been wanting to talk about it. We'll let you have your fun.
Yay! Cheers. It's just
too excited, lad.
So it's Jeremy Clark. You've probably seen the advertisement. It's quite funny. Like all the billboards, it's like Jeremy Clarkson is an F asterisk 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 asterisk, and it stands for farmer, not what you might think it might be, which is quite funny. Good bit of branding, as you kind of come to expect from that whole Amazon Grand Tour production team. And yeah, they made Clarkson's Farm, which is really cool. Basically, the guy owns a farm and decides he's going to farm it. And it's basically like Top Gear and the Grand Tour, but just on a farm. It's quite hilarious.
Such a strange concept.
Honestly, if you just picture the Grand Tour and like Top Gear and all the just the random things they do, and like all the stuff that Jeremy Clarkson's done over the years, I just start thinking about farm context, and
put it on a farm.
Literally, you're not far off.
Amazon execs must have been like, "What can we do that's weird but not totally out there?"
Yeah, and there's Jeremy Clarkson just like
on
rolling around in a Lamborghini tractor. It's brilliant, honestly. It's hilarious.
To be fair, Clarkson, love him or hate him, he never fails to make something that is quite wholesomely entertaining in his own, kind of
unique way.
No, he is good, and it's also you guys will, I'm sure, from a cinematic and production perspective, it is really slick. Like it's very well done.
It's one thing Top Gear used to be on point with.
Exactly.
Some of their cinematics. Oh, yeah, chef's kiss.
Literally, they are like, especially with the fact it's a proper it's a farm. He's got like just acres of land, and the shots of just like kind of the hills, and oh yeah, it's really good. It's very wholesome. There's some sad bits, there's some hilarious bits. Um,
Is it like episodic or is it just like a film?
yeah,
Oh,
episodic.
right, so it's a series, right?
Yeah, it's
Ends
on
with a
Amazon Prime.
cliffhanger. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a really dramatic previously on Clarkson's farm.
Bombshell,
Yeah.
as he used to say.
Yeah.
And on that bombshell,
What have you
Charlie.
been watching, Joe?
I did it, boys. I watched Mulan from 2020.
Why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah. All right. So I just didn't know what to watch last night. I watched a lot of heavy films last week, and by the time I'd finished doing, I was playing some video games with friends, and by the time I'd wrapped up, I was like, well, I want to get into bed and watch something. Just that I don't have to pay attention to, and I went around Netflix. I went on Prime. I did Disney Plus like twice. I don't know what to watch. And then I thought, well, I've seen the original and I liked it. I just want to watch it for comparative reasons. And I ended up watching it all, staying up till like 1 o'clock in the morning, just because it
How
was
long
that.
is
It was like 2 hours.
Oh, okay, right.
But it is so bad. It is the worst film I've seen in a long. I was laughing at the end.
And we've done The Room recently.
Yeah,
Like,
no.
yeah.
Honestly, Ben will be my witness for this. I messaged him as I was watching it, and I was like, "The Room is better than this."
Wow.
It's got the most janky CGI, the worst script. All the music is gone. What else? Mushu is gone. There's no Mushu anymore.
I don't know who that is, but
He's
I'll
like
take your word
he's
for
like
it.
this singing dragon.
Right.
Mushu's gone. And yeah, it's just a terrible, terrible film. Really bad. And the physics are worse than like Fast and Furious physics. There's a bit where the emperor of the Imperial City knocks someone unconscious with a red cloth.
Isn't that like magic red cloth though?
No. Well, here's why I really, really hated the film. Is that the musical, the classic animation, it is very clearly like fantasy. Like there's
Right.
magic, there's powers in this. And then the live action one, I mean, compare it to say the live action Aladdin. That really just was a live action Aladdin. Nothing was taken out. A few new songs were added in. Will Smith was the genie. Love it or hate it, it was still Aladdin.
Right.
And it was more accurate to like culturally accurate and less culturally insensitive, and that was all great. And it was successful because it wasn't trying to do anything new. Like why break it if it isn't broken?
Yeah.
But Mulan, first of all, it takes all of the music out and it tries to. I'm gonna say it tries to Nolanize Mulan, like
Okay.
this gritty Chinese, like this Mongolian invasion of medieval China. There's no music. There's a dash of surface level feminism thrown in just to make people happy, and there's no like depth to it. It's just all of the worst cliches of a reboot slash live action, kind of like a adaptation. It's just terrible.
Would you say much like A Hard Day's Night, it's a bit of a cash grab then?
I don't even think this was a cash grab. I think this was trying to make China happy.
Right, okay.
Like, considering the lead actress of 2020 Mulan, she's just one of the worst human beings I've ever heard of in a long time. Because like I was watching it, I was reading about the controversy around the whole, like, because the film was boycotted when it came out.
Yeah.
And I was just reading about it, and just her Wikipedia page goes from like bad to just, I don't want to say the C word because we want to try and keep this family friendly, but you can imagine my disdain. You can imagine my disdain when I read things like, not only does she support the police brutality that's going on in Hong Kong, but she also supports the continued exploitation and use of cotton in the Xinjiang region of China, where currently millions of Uyghur Muslims are being interned in quote unquote education camps.
Right. Okay.
And so she recently like departed from Adidas. She was like a brand representative for them, and she cut ties with them because Adidas decided to join a coalition of brands who were all going to boycott any cotton that came from that area.
Right. Okay.
So Yeah. So she's just
We
the
don't like her
Chinese
then.
film. Yeah, we don't like her, and she's just a puppet of the Chinese film industry, which Disney is constantly trying to get in the pants of, as we've seen with the MCU, as we'll probably see with Shang-Chi.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but again, I keep saying it. We keep coming back to this topic a lot. I think it would be really interesting to have a episode where we talk in depth about and do some really good research where we talk about the relationship between the Chinese film industry and Hollywood, because it's so fascinating. And the fact that no Hollywood actors are actually talking about the genocide going on in Xinjiang is just awful. But enough about that.
I thought this was going to be a less depressing episode.
I'm
Joe.
sorry. Well, for listeners at home, to break the illusion, we do sometimes record these episodes back to back, and I'm still passionately depressed from This Is England and I, Daniel Blake. So, on some lighter news though, we did have some Crown season 4 casting today. Johnny Lee Miller, who a great British actor, who, as we know from Trainspotting, Frankenstein. He also played Sherlock Holmes. He's been cast as John Major, who was Prime Minister of Great Britain during the 90s. So yeah, it's an interesting casting. He looks nothing like him, but I can imagine with a big pair of like milk bottle glasses, it would be all right.
I've still not caught up with The Crown. So
Have you not? Where have you got up
no.
to?
We just watched like the Aberfan disaster one.
Oh, you're not too far.
So what season? That's when
That's
the cast
3.
has just changed. Yeah.
That's 3. So season 4 was a bit of a letdown for me because there was so many interesting things that happened in the 1980s in Britain. Look at when we've just talked about recently. This Is England, and Falklands was going on, and there's so many things that happened, and the IRA as well. Obviously, huge deal. Like Thatcher had an assassination attempt on her a couple of times. And season 4 doesn't address any of that. Season 4 is really contained, and it just focuses on a very young Diana falling in love with Charles.
Right.
And it
Doesn't
season 4
really
is a bit.
It plays
Yeah.
it safe, sort of thing.
You could. I think my advice to you is, if you want to catch up quickly, just watch the first episode of season 4 and then watch the second one, because that's a good one. And then watch the last one, and just miss out all of the drama in between, because
Right. Okay.
it's nothing you can't read on a tabloid. About Diana and Charles's marriage.
Yeah.
How shit it was. But yeah, I mean, speaking of, great British establishments, let's talk about Skyfall. Obviously, James Bond, MI5. Chaz, you were quite excited to talk about this one this week, so I'm going to let you kick things off with Skyfall.
I don't know what else there is to say about it. It's just a really, really good James Bond film. Like one of the best recent ones. I mean, I've not seen what's it called, Spectre, but I have seen the other Daniel Craig ones, and this one is a real standout for me. I think I actually saw this one at the cinema.
Yeah, I did as well.
For me, to go and see a James Bond film at the cinema is it's not very on brand, but there's something about it. I think it really neatly ties things up that have been festering away in the James Bond canon, and that bad guy's mint.
What do you think about the whole franchise of James Bond? Because I think we've had like fleeting conversations about the whole franchise before, but I've never really heard an in-depth sort of your opinion on James Bond as a whole.
I'm not a massive fan. I've not seen them all, but they're all right. I mean, they're a bit, obviously they've got a bit of history with misogyny and macho fucking I'm a man sort of thing. But
right.
I don't know. Some of them are shit, and then some of them, like Skyfall, can be really amazing action films. So I think it's really hit and miss for me, the whole thing.
Yeah. What about you, Ben?
Oh, I think as a whole, as a brand, I love it. I've also read some of the books and kind of just I really like it. That I think it's a really complex character. I mean, he gets a lot of criticism for basically not being complex. It's just kind of like, it's a dude who likes women and drinks and shoots people. And, I think a lot of the time the storyline is, revolves around, he either makes a mess of things because it's him, or, kind of it gets personal because it's him. And it's quite an overused theme, an overused plot. Plot. And it's kind yeah. I mean, we've had what's Craig? Is he the fifth or the sixth? The fifth or the sixth?
You're about to say Doctor Who,
yeah.
I was say Doctor. No, the fifth or sixth Bond, and he's done. I think he's done a brilliant job as James Bond, and he's not been. There are some really bad. If you take it out of context, there's some really bad scenes, like from the older films, where it's like um, Roger Moore or Sean Connery, and they just kind of like total disregard for a woman or whatever. But I think Bond, because it's kind of been a staple for the last 70, 80 years or whatever it is now. I think each new Bond film is a reflection of kind of maybe society, film industry at that time. And I kind of, I'm quite objective. I'll judge the film by its setting. I won't be like, oh, it's James Bond. He's just a misogynic. He just hates women. We can't get him off the screens. It's awful. It's not. He's not woke enough. It's like, I don't really care about that. I mean, as long as the next film that comes out, he's not gonna, is better. Then I think it's as a franchise, it's going in the right direction. And Skyfall, I think, was a brilliant one for you to pick, Charlie. There's quite a lot that it picks up, and it help. It goes. Firstly, I think quite a major, role that they recast and diversified was Moneypenny, and cannot remember the actress's name, but she did a brilliant job, and wasn't just a token member of the cast, which was really good to see, I think. So it's definitely going in the right direction. And we've also had Spectre since then, which was another great Daniel Craig one, which I know you've not seen, Charlie, because I was talking about that. But that's another really good one. But yeah, no, I think I would have to agree that Skyfall definitely. Naomi Harris, that's Moneypenny, and
yeah, she was fantastic. She's a fantastic actress. We recently covered her performance in Moonlight.
Yeah,
she's fantastic.
Brilliant. So it's it's a cracking film, and it really doesn't hold back. It's a very gritty Bond.
Yeah,
and a lot happens and a lot unpacks. There's Dame Judi Dench is incredible in it as well. As M. No spoil. I won't give any spoilers away. And also Javier Bardem is. I mean, he's a great villain, isn't he? We've seen him. We also covered a film, didn't we, recently, where he was the villain. What was it?
Yes, No Country for Old Men.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, he continues to astonish with his villainous performances.
I think he made this film for me. Like that's what really sold it for me.
And I think going back to the point that you made before about some of the Bond films being quite formulaic in that it always comes back to him and it's always has to be something personal with him. And what I like about Skyfall is that it's personal to M and not Bond this time. And the villain doesn't care about Bond, he just cares about M. So Bond becomes almost this supporting character, this kind of bodyguard. And I think it gives it a new interesting dynamic. And just Javier Bardem's performance, again, it's so, well, it's just amazing. I can't think of a way to describe it other than it's fantastic. And I think all the pieces of the film are all just put together so well. And again, Skyfall always feels to me in the canon of James Bond like a spin-off. But not in a bad way. Like, sometimes we think of spin-offs as being not very connected or not very beneficial to the main canon. But I think for such a refreshing break from, because you haven't seen Spectre yet, Charles, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace and Spectre form the Spectre trilogy.
Right.
But Skyfall doesn't fall into that. It's a completely independent story. It's like a side quest. James Bond has his mission of stopping Mr. White and the Spectre organization, and all of a sudden he unlocks a side quest talking to M.
Right. Okay.
And that's what it feels like to me. And I think the biggest contribution to this film's success was that element of surprise. everyone expected it to be another Quantum of Solace because Quantum of Solace didn't do very well, like critically. Commercially, it did fantastic, but critically, it wasn't quite on the same level as Casino Royale, which obviously brought Bond back to the front and center.
That's another class
pop
film,
culture.
to be fair.
It's fantastic. I think that one's my favorite personally. And I think Sam Mendes, who Sir Sam Mendes, is a fantastic British director. He went on to do 1917. Yeah, exactly. He did Skyfall and Spectre, and so I think that I want to say, based on how how Skyfall feels, and just the overall success of that film, I want to say he was experimenting,
right?
Because of how detached Skyfall is from the rest of the James canon, the James Bond canon.
Yeah,
he did then he returned to it. He directed Spectre himself, so he wrapped up the story after doing his sort of side story, and he did wrap up Spectre really, really well. And then we'll have to see which direction it goes in.
I think I don't know. I would maybe argue the other side. Like I think if you look at the older James Bond films, a lot of them aren't related between. Like there's not a lot of cross plot between. There's not a lot of storylines that survive beyond the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a couple where like maybe a villain comes back or something, but it's notorious. For being the woman of the moment. The Bond girl survives the film maybe, or doesn't survive the film, but you never see her again. The villain is beat and defeated. So I thought it was maybe the other way. It was more of a throwback, more to the older Bond films, where actually it's a self-contained piece.
Okay.
And we're introduced back to Q. Moneypenny is, like we've always mentioned, Naomi Hamish is brought in. We get these kind of refreshed characters, this refreshed storyline, which is kind of separate from what everyone, like you said, was expecting. And I really liked that because I think it's just, I watched all of the Bond films growing up. Like, there was, I think, for maybe one of the Bond anniversaries, I think Sky like made a Bond channel, and just for like the whole like one summer, 1 year, they just literally all they did was play Bond films back to back. I don't think I've watched them all like twice. For me, I loved it because it kind of reminded me of that. But at the same time, like you said, absolutely cracking film, and definitely elevates from the first two. Casino Royale was a great film.
Set the bar, I think, really did.
Definitely, but I think when you look back at it, it was made in 2006, and Skyfall is 6 years later. I think it feels a lot fresher in terms of like, it's a lot more maybe cinematic. It's a bit more dramatic. It's a bit more, you've got I think what I would probably say is arguably one of the most successful theme tunes, Bond theme tunes in recent years. Is Skyfall. It absolutely insane. Like it was number one, wasn't it? And it was huge. I can't remember.
I don't care much for Adele, but I think it was a cracking song.
Absolutely brilliant, and it was in the film as well. When they put it in the film at the end, in that kind of when they're at the estate in Scotland, and it's just
that's
chilling.
One of the best sequences. It's that whole house thing at the end.
Yeah.
I think also another thing that contributed to its success as well is that 2012 was the 50th anniversary of Bond since the release of Dr. No. So I think there was so much, like the marketing that Sony put into Skyfall was out of this world. Like so many millions must have been poured into the marketing because, there were so many box sets released. Like I remember there was a box set released in HMV called the 50th anniversary Bond box set, and it was all of the films in this really nice DVD package. And they'd poured so much money into Skyfall's marketing that they had actually produced all of these DVD packages with a space ready for Skyfall, even though it hadn't been out in cinemas yet. When you bought this box set and you would open it, and all the discs would be there, and then there would be a space at the end for Skyfall, and there'd be a little sticker saying like you can pick up your Skyfall DVD, Blu-ray, like in like holiday 2012.
Wow,
that's cool.
That's
good marketing. Yeah,
it's fantastic because like you go, all of a sudden you realize it's Bond's 50th anniversary, and you say to your mates, "Oh, let's have a marathon," and then all of a sudden you go and buy the box set, and it's like, oh, we'll have to buy the DVD now after we've paid money to go and see it in the cinema as well. And it grossed 1.1 billion. And I think it was just such a successful marketing campaign, such a successful film at such a successful time. You got to remember this was the year of the British Olympics as well.
Yeah.
They had James Bond. He was jumping out of
Yeah.
a helicopter with the Queen at the opening ceremony for the Olympics.
How badass is that?
This was such a huge. I know it's such a huge year for Bond, and I think whilst Casino Royale is still my favorite in terms of story, there's no denying the grandiosity of Skyfall was. I don't think Bond's ever going to find that again, that as a franchise.
I mean, Spectre was pretty good. Like,
It was, yeah, it was, and that's saying something.
In grand scale, I would say they definitely match up. And I think, like we've said, I think the way that I distinguish Spectre in Skyfall is one is concluding 3 films, and the other is its own film. That's the way I distinguish them, and I don't really judge them side to side, because I think they're made
They're
by
different dogs, aren't they?
Exactly, but they kind of have similar veins, that we get. And both great films. But Skyfall was just insane. And one point, oh my god, that's just an obscene amount of money, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Considering it only had a budget of he says had a budget of somewhere between 150 and 200 million, but then to multiply that by 5 at the box office is fantastic.
I think it's Bond in itself as a franchise is the most quintessential British cinema thing ever. Yeah. I don't think you'll ever be more British than having a James Bond film.
Yeah. Whenever I think to myself, okay, the biggest sort of British pop culture icons, I'd say, you got number 1, you got the Beatles. Number 2, probably James Bond. Let's face it. And then, I'd also say Doctor Who.
Yeah.
That's been around for so long. That's up there. Pop culture icons. You see that blue TARDIS and you just know what it is. You see the Aston Martin and you know what it is.
I was going to say, I've got one for you.
Yeah.
Who's your next James Bond?
I'm glad you asked this question.
Yeah, it's difficult.
And I'm going to start off by saying I don't want it to be Idris Elba, because I see that all the time in the tabloids.
Yeah. No, I think he's maybe 5 years ago, but I think
he's too Luther. Like, he's Luther to me. Like, and that's that's not going to change. And I think Idris Elba is a bit too he plays that kind of bad cop really well.
Yeah. By the way, if for our audience, if you've not watched Luther, it is a BBC crime drama starring Idris Elba, and it is incredible. But
it's really good.
Like Joe has suggested, he is not always the Boy Scout that he might meant to be. So, cracking piece of television, another great British production. I
think there's a lot of political connotations connected to who the next Bond is going to be, because obviously they want to diversify the franchise. And
that's what I was going to say. Would you like to see him diversified, or do you think that it would be okay for the next Bond to be another white British male dude?
Honestly, I don't care.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think the supporting cast needs to be diversified, but I think James Bond is too much of an icon to change.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think
there's quite a lot of rumors going around that it might even be a woman at one point, wasn't there? It was like they might swap it. It's either going to be Idris Elba or let's go crazy.
In the new trailer, isn't there another 00 agent that's a woman?
Yeah.
So I think you should keep James Bond as he has always been. But
I agree. Yeah.
As they're doing with other 00 agents and stuff, start bringing in stuff like that. It'd be awesome.
I've said it time and time again, is that if you want to provide really fantastic acting opportunities for women and contribute to the diversification of the film industry, make new interesting roles that are going to inspire women and ethnic minorities, instead of essentially if James Bond were to become a woman, which it isn't far-fetched, at the end of the day James Bond could just be a code used by MI5 and MI6 that could explain why we've had so many different Bonds.
Yeah. I think that's more than likely what it is, isn't it?
It's more than likely what it is. I get that. But I think in the sort of the zeitgeist of each era of the Bond has fallen into, I think to now make James Bond a woman would not only be a disservice to the franchise, because at the end of the day, I don't really care about that. It would actually be a disfranchise. It would be a dis. It would just be, I think, more damaging to
female representation.
Exactly. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, and I think that if this new character in the new No Time to Die film, the next James Bond film, turns out to be a really interesting and successful character that audiences love, I would really support the idea of her being like a spin-off, 006,
Yeah.
008, whatever. Make a James Bond cinematic universe. I don't care. Just create interesting characters and don't change things that are inherently ingrained in the zeitgeist, I would say.
No, that I would completely agree. Now, tell me who you would pick and why is it Loki?
I don't know. Tom Hiddleston's just Loki for me.
He would be it. I don't know. I think he would do a really good job.
I want someone who encapsulates that kind of dogmatic Britishness. I can't believe those words coming out of my mouth.
More rougher.
But
for ages, I wanted it to be Tom Hardy, but I just don't think it doesn't suit him now. Like a few years ago, I think he would have been perfect for it.
Yeah, what about Henry Cavill, Superman?
Wouldn't he? The thing is, though, we've seen him as the man from U.N.C.L.E., and I don't know. I just kind of. It's a bit maybe Americanized. Do you know what I mean? Like, kind of. I'm not.
What
sure.
about Reggie Jean Page from what's his Bridgerton? The one that played he played the Duke of Hastings. I think he'd be good.
He would be good.
Yeah.
That would.
What I'd love is a crossover between what's the one with Colin Firth in it? The Gentleman or something, is it?
Oh yeah, something like that. Yeah.
What about from that film?
After seeing, I know he's going to be playing Batman soon, and that's a very iconic role to shake off. But what about Robert Pattinson? Because he was really great in Tenet. I got real good espionage vibes from him when he was in Tenet.
Yeah. That'd be great. Maybe that's the Shoal shout.
There we go.
For next James Bond.
The Shoal ship. We're going to ship Robert Pattinson.
I also wouldn't mind. I think Riz Ahmed would be really good in the role as well. To have a Muslim, some 007 representing Islam, would be fantastic. I know he's so outspoken about Asian representation in film, and obviously he's done very well recently with the Oscar noms for The Sound of Metal.
Have you seen that yet?
I haven't. No, still haven't seen it yet. But Riz Ahmed, I think, would be a great Bond.
I can see him being more maybe like who's the supporting actor, the American?
Q or Felix or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I can see him being like kind of a diversified supporting agent, maybe more than Bond.
Yeah. There's so many great British actors that I would love to see in James Bond. But
speaking of great British actors,
there we go.
Alec Guinness. Am I right?
Alec Guinness, am I right? You at home listeners probably know him as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but before he starred in Star Wars in 1977, he did have a phenomenally successful career in comedy movies with the Ealing Comedies, which was a really great studio in London that outputted some fantastic comedies like the one we're going to talk about now, 1949, Kind Hearts and Coronets. They also did Passport to Pimlico and The Lady Killers. Man in the White Coat. Yeah, some fantastic ones. You can go and buy the whole Ealing comedy box set now at HMV as well. It's a great gift. So yeah, Kind of Hearts and Coronets. Chaz, you wrote here in our notes that it was so much funnier than you remember it.
I think when we first watched it, were we in college? We
studied it in college. Yeah,
I was trying to remember what for. Like I genuinely can't remember what we studied it for. It wasn't for an exam or anything, was it?
It was. Yeah, it was looking at. We had to compare like different studios. So we were looking at, I think, American comedy and then the Ealing comedies, and then the other half of the exam we had to look at a remake versus an original. So we looked at the original True Grit, and then we looked at the Coen Brothers True Grit.
You know, I watched both of those the night before the exam.
Same.
Yeah.
And then you went on to do film at uni. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why don't you give us a rundown of Kind Hearts and Coronets? Because I don't feel like a lot of audience members, contemporary audiences, would have heard of this film. I imagine it's soon going to be lost in a lot of people's minds because mainly because of the age, really.
And even though I just don't think people will necessarily find it as funny as it would have been back in the day. But the basic premise of the film is that what's his name? Is it Dascoin? Is it? What's his actual name?
Louis Dascoin Mazzini or something like that.
Yeah.
The Duke of Chalfont or something.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
A massive. It's a godful, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's basically Louis was born into a very rich family, and his mother married an estranged Italian painter, and was then like shunned from the family, and along with her, obviously Louis gets shunned away as well. And it's about him trying to reclaim his right to the dukedom, and he goes about this by killing off all the existing heirs to the dukedom, and
who are all played by Alec Guinness.
Yeah. It's just a very strange film, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually remember, because, whenever you have to watch something or when you have to study something, you don't really, there's something in the back of your brain that just goes, I just don't want to pay attention to this. But the first time watching it, I remember watching it in class, and I just remember not getting it.
Yeah.
And I think coming back to it now, I appreciate it so much more than I did, the night before an exam.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, initially, so I remember that Alec Guinness was only offered 4 of the roles, but he really insisted on playing all 8, and I'm glad he did, because it's so funny whenever it's so obvious that it's him.
Yeah.
Every time. It's like Airplane. Like it's quite literal comedy, isn't it? And it's not trying to suspend your disbelief at all.
No, but it's also quite dark. Like, one of my favorite bits is at the very beginning when the guy who's coming to execute Louis the next morning. He's like, "Well, how do I refer to him?" And it's just stupid stuff like, "Well, you're killing the guy in the morning. Who gives a shit how you refer to him?" Like, it's quite like, no, I don't want to say deep, but like, you have to think about the humor rather than just.
And the ending as well, with it all just seeming like for nothing as well. Like when Louis remembering that he's left all of the documents in his cell.
Yeah.
For anyone to read. Yeah. So yeah, check out this cast list. So Alec Guinness plays the 9 members, not 8, of the Ascon family. He plays Ethered's 4 younger brothers, the Reverend Lord Henry, Rufus, Horatio. He plays the banker, and then he also plays Lady Agatha de Ascon, who is the sister, and then the 2 nephews as well, young Ascon and then Henry. So
there's quite a few roles though.
Yeah, I mean, Alec Guinness was very. I think this was an interesting role for him, because he was always quite critical of text. I know that because he was very critical to George Lucas when he started to do Star Wars. And Alec Guinness insisted on changing some lines because, let's face it, George Lucas can't write dialogue. And so I think looking back at some of his earlier works, I know that he was kind of like the Edward Norton of his era. He was difficult to work with. So for him to come forward and say that he wants to play all 8 of these roles, I imagine it was quite a stressful situation or difficult to organize or orchestrate.
Yeah.
But it's Alec Guinness. You have to have faith in his methods. Yeah, he's fantastic. But I do know that he almost nearly drowned in the scene where the Admiral goes down with the sinking ship. He was held down, so Guinness was held down by wires whilst the set filled up with water, right? And once the scene was wrapped, the crew started to leave until one technician realized that they had forgotten to let him out of the wires. So they're just like, yeah, cool, we got the shot. Let's go home, lads. And then Sir Alec Guinness is still underwater. So they dive in to the water and get some wire cutters and free him. Fortunately for everyone involved, he took it on the chin, and he just, if anything, he just boasted about his ability to hold his breath for a really long time. So make that, make of that as you will. I didn't know it was actually based on a book as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's based on a book called Israel Rank: The Autobiography of a Criminal.
Wow.
By a man called, and I'm not joking you when I say this, Roy Horniman.
Fuck off. Fuck's sake.
Roy Horniman. So there you go. Yeah,
I think Kind Hearts and Coronets is a much better title.
So do I. Kind Hearts and Coronets obviously went on to critical acclaim, and it made its way into the British Film Institute, and it's one of the top 100 British films of all time. And I think, again, like with other films we looked at this festival, in 2005 it was included in Time's list of top 100 films of all time as well. So
I think it's quite a damning representation of British aristocracy, isn't it? It shows how petty and feudal they are in a way.
It's kind of like there's a very famous play, Pygmalion. So from what I understand, the book was written a few decades before Kind Hearts and Coronets adapted it to film, and the book was written sort of around the same time as a lot of art was emerging as a criticism of the British upper class and aristocracy. And I remember Kind Hearts and Coronets really reminds me of Pygmalion, which is a play by George Bernard Shaw, who was a socialist. And he worked very closely with socialists. He actually wrote some manifestos, and he writes this play called Pygmalion, who you will all be familiar with because in 1956 it was adapted into My Fair Lady, which is the very famous, the Scouse. I think in My Fair Lady, it's a Scouse lady who wants to learn how to talk properly. But in Pygmalion, she's a Cockney flower girl who decides to get taught by a voice coach who's just absolute knobhead. So he teaches her how to, he teaches her elocution and an accent. So there's very iconic moments in that depicting aristocracy, and in the end, what's really funny is the lead character at the end of the play, she's standing in front of the characters, and the final act, she's bashing aristocracy, and she's bashing the establishment, but she's doing it with this really posh accent because she's just learnt it. And instead of at the start of the play, the teacher is telling her, repeat after me. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain, and she's like, the rain in Spain falls mainly, and it's fantastic. So yeah, I think this for me falls into the same category. There was a lot of anti-capitalist, pro-socialist, I would say propaganda, I suppose.
But it's not like overt. It's so like subversive into the way the aristocracy works that if you look at it on the surface, it looks like it's supporting it, but when you look deeper, you're like, well, it's just taking the piss out of it.
And I think that British comedy does that so well, and I think it always has.
Yeah.
It always has. I think, British comedy's always managed to find a way to get super serious messages like hidden in films.
Yeah.
Especially
for Ealing, like they're masters of it, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's sort of, it's not necessarily like out of the slapstick age, it's become a much more refined and like a much more British thing to do this sort of dark, subversive comedy.
They even recently, in recent times, Ealing Studios, they did things like The Importance of Being Earnest in 2002. They did a film adaptation of that. That was Ealing Studios.
Wow, I didn't know it was still going.
Yeah, so Miramax distributed it, but Ealing still had I'm not sure if they're still going on now, but they are still active. I think let's have a look. Their last thing that they did, later films. Wow, yeah, they're producing Edgar Wright's upcoming Last Night in Soho film.
Oh wow, that's awesome! I didn't know that they still existed.
And they did the St. Trinian's films. They did Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, well, so they're very much paired with Edgar Wright, I suppose.
Notting Hill.
Really?
Yeah, and the importance of being earnest. Yeah,
That's
fantastic.
so cool.
Yeah. So that's that's quite surprised me. But there we go. Yeah, so Ealing's still very active today, and like I said, they went on to do recent more adaptations like The Importance of Being Earnest in 2002, and again, that's another very pro-socialist, anti-establishment play that came out of the same era as well, based on 1895 by Oscar Wilde. The Importance of Being Earnest, a trivial comedy for serious people. Even that title just sums up what we've been trying to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose, speaking of really great British literature, we're going to have to wrap this one up pretty soon. And I think we're ending on a good note here, talking about William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Oh boy, this was a long one.
It's a big boy. Yeah,
it's a big boy. Yeah, 3 hours is a long time to devote to something that is in quite an alienating language, especially if you're not familiar with it. And I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think your average viewer's exposure to Shakespeare would have been English class in high school.
Yeah.
And I think
even
unless
for me,
you...
it still stays there, really. But I suppose we did it in college, didn't we? Because we studied Hamlet, didn't we?
Yeah, a bit.
But I just feel, even now, it's still very out of my depth, but I still can find some enjoyment in it.
Yeah. I mean, Ben, how familiar are you with Shakespeare in general?
To be honest, not too much. I've watched a few productions over the years. There's one of my particular favourites. I can't actually remember which one it is. It's not Midsummer Nights, not the Midsummer one. It's not. Is it the Wives of something? Is that one of them? Yeah, Merry Wives of Windsor was the one actually. I like that one.
That's Ben's statement on Shakespeare.
Yeah, to be honest, never really sucked me in. Kind of. It's one of those things, isn't it? A lot of theatre troupes love to do Shakespeare, but they love to subvert it and do it in modern settings. I mean, I say lots of theatre troupes done it. I've done it before. I think I have done some Shakespeare before. Once, at the peak of my acting career at the age of 14.
You're a washed up Shakespeare actor now doing podcasts.
Exactly. Aren't we all? I don't know. It's kind of one of those. I think in the modern, I'm not really a huge theatre goer. I'm not really a huge patron of it, and a lot of the time when I've seen something, it's just like the same thing. It's basically, the classic, but just twisted and put in a modern setting. Gotta say, Leonardo DiCaprio as Romeo.
I feel like that's a lot of young people's extent of their Shakespeare knowledge is Leonardo DiCaprio as Romeo.
Was a great film, though.
It is a very good film. I think it's a great adaptation.
They made us watch it in English at school.
Oh yeah,
same.
Classic.
Yeah.
Tell me you went to an English state school without telling me you went to an English state school. There's a copy of Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann on the shelf.
Yeah.
With all the AQA slotted in between and in spectacles and of mice and men.
Oh, don't you dare diss spectacles, man.
I'm not.
That's a class play. I love it.
We did To Kill a Mockingbird. The other set did in spectacles.
Okay, there we go. Well, Hamlet, Chaz. There are so many versions of Hamlet out there made by the British Film Institute. Why did you go for this one?
Because you showed it me once, and I really enjoyed it. Honestly, That's the only reason. I don't think I've seen any others, honestly.
Because there's Oscar Wilde and Kenneth Branagh did one as well. That was like 4 hours long.
Oh wow. How are they all different lengths? Like you'll probably know this more. Have they edited Hamlet to do it this short? Oh, okay, right.
The play itself is about 4 hours.
Right. Okay.
And a lot of the time it will get shortened down. A good example as well is they did Macbeth a couple years ago with Michael Fassbender, and it was I think, did you watch that one? It was a
I
wonderfully
think
moody
I have,
film.
yeah.
It was really good. It had Marion Cotillard in it from Inception.
Right.
In it with Michael Fassbender, and Macbeth is a 3.5 hour play, and that movie was 1 hour and like 55 or something like that.
Oh wow.
So they cut it out, and for all intents and purposes, the thing about Shakespeare is that his plays are simple. It's the language that enriches the story, and however much you want to cut out is completely up to you. And I think Kenneth Branagh, he's a little self-masturbatory for me sometimes. Like,
Okay.
and so that's why he did like the full uncut one when he did a film adaptation of it in which he starred in it as Hamlet at the age of 40
Right.
and directed it and produced it. So that's
But
that.
I feel
And then
to do Shakespeare anyway, you've got to be a bit pretentious, haven't you? Do you not think?
I think to be offered a role in Shakespeare, you need to be a white posh British boy actor, fueled by an industry that is still quite systemically racist and believes that Shakespeare should be performed by white English people.
Right.
So just a bit of context before we get into Hamlet itself. My master's degree was on voice practice, and so I had to do a lot of Shakespeare and how to teach Shakespeare. And so I actually discovered that there's a lot of prejudice surrounding Shakespeare. But then out of that, sort of like a phoenix from the ashes, there, as Ben said before, there's been some wonderful, twisted adaptations of Shakespeare's work. And I think, to my knowledge, the best production of Macbeth I've ever seen was an all-African cast in which the setting was like a modern-day Uganda, and Macbeth was, instead of a Scottish king, was now like this Ugandan dictator.
Oh, okay.
And it was phenomenal. The language hadn't changed; nothing was changed. They still called, it was Macbeth and Duncan and King this and Queen that, but the accents just enriched it so much, and I think that's why. I think this is a good version to pick, which is the 2009 David Tennant version, because yes, David Tennant is a white, posh, pretty boy British actor, but this was before it got a bit too much, because after this production we had Tom Hiddleston, Benedict Cumberbatch, Andrew Scott. They've all done Hamlet recently, and I remember the Benedict Cumberbatch one bored me to death.
Oh, really?
And I think that's really interesting about Shakespeare, is that how can the same text bore you in one setting and not bore you in another one? And so onto this version of Hamlet that we've picked for the festival, it doesn't bore me. I think it's I think it's encapsulating. I think it's, well, first of all, David Tennant is fantastic as Hamlet. He captures the role really well. So if you're not familiar with the story of Hamlet, Hamlet is a young Danish prince whose father's recently been killed, and essentially he's away at university and isn't there, and so his uncle kind of snatches up the throne, and you find out that his uncle was the one that killed his father, and it becomes this tale of revenge. But Hamlet was really ahead of its time in that it dealt with a lot of very serious mental health issues. This was 400 years ago. And throughout the play, Hamlet doesn't act upon his revenge. It's always known as this play where, it's all talk and no action, because he can't bring himself to stop his uncle. And so he procrastinates all the time. And that's why you get, the very famous soliloquy of, to be or not to be, that is the question that everyone knows. And, he's constantly pondering life and death and suicide and the point of life and the big questions, and I think David Tennant gets that wonderfully. And I think that other big posh pretty boy actors that have come along recently, like Cumberbatch and Andrew Scott, I think it's more of like a cash grab for them
to say they've done it, sort of thing.
Yeah, to say they've done it. It's a bit of an ego boost. Whereas I get the sense watching David Tennant that he did it for the love of it and for the language. Because you got to remember, this is 2009. David Tennant is still Doctor Who. And he's very successful, and he didn't need to do this, but he wanted to, because he's always loved theatre. And you can tell that in the way that, you know, whenever someone approaches a Shakespearean tragedy, they approach it with tragic eyes, you know, so to speak. And it's always so depressing. And you can tell when an actor has gone, I need to really act this emotionally and get the tears jerking. And it's so boring. And that's what Benedict Cumberbatch did. You know, the tears got rolling like straight from the lift of the curtain, and it was just a boring performance for 3 hours. Whereas David Tennant manages to find so much humor in the text, because there's a lot. Shakespeare was hilarious. He was funny. Even in his tragedies, he was such a joker. And, you know, whether it was with rhymes, you know, some of the rhymes don't work nowadays because our accent and our language have shifted, but there were so many rhymes and puns and limericks that he put in his plays. And David gets all of that. And he has that Doctor Who charisma still. It's essentially like, you know, the Time Lord himself has just dropped into medieval Denmark and has just decided to, you know,
the fan theory.
There we go. That's the fan theory. And so maybe a question you could ask yourself is that, you know, did it piggyback off of the success of Doctor Who? Because this is coming off of season 4, which is the height of New Who.
So it's called New Who.
Yeah, New Who. You got Classic Who and you got New Who. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I think he does a fantastic job, and I think because he finds all of that comedy when the emotion is needed and necessary, he hits it where it counts. You know, it is there, and it's heavy hitting. Whereas I watched the Andrew Scott version, probably about 6 months ago. It was broadcast on BBC Two, and it was just Andrew Scott playing himself.
That disappoints me because I like Andrew Scott a lot.
Yeah, so do I. You know, he was great when we watched him in The Pursuit of Love a couple of weeks ago. But he was just playing himself. You know, when David Tennant says to be or not to be, you can tell he's really asking himself a question, that he's pondering the nature of life and death. And then when Andrew Scott does it, you know, I'm going to try and do my best Andrew Scott impression here. He's just sort of, you know, like, to be or not to be. And he's just, you know, he's got his hands just like flying around like he does. And he's just trying to be to himself.
Right.
So it's a hard role to get. It really is. And I'm glad you picked this version as well, because in terms of film, I know I'm talking a lot.
Not really a film. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. So can you consider it a film? Because I know, Ben, you haven't seen it, but it's not really a film. It's basically they took the stage show and they took it to BBC Studios and they filmed it like it was a film, but it's still the stage show. So it's kind of strange. Can you consider it a film, Chaz? Because you've seen it.
Yeah. You're just filming it on a set, essentially, which is what you know, films used to do. That's all they used to do.
Yeah.
Or you could look at, like, you wouldn't say that Coronation Street isn't a TV show or so, would you? Because it's just filmed on a set.
Yeah. Coronation Street's always so much better on stage.
Do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah,
like,
I know what you mean.
That's like a one-room set, isn't it, essentially?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you were saying, oh, it's not boring. But as we said, it is literally just the one room, essentially. But it isn't boring, you're right. It's
and that's why the language counts so much.
And the performance. They're the only things you've got to focus on, really. When there's no mise en scène to look at, really. It's just white, isn't it? So, from what I can remember.
Yeah.
It just, the performances obviously mean so much more.
Yeah. How do you feel about the fourth wall breaking?
I can't actually remember what that was, so you're going to have to explain that.
So like, but he talks to you, like he looks into the camera.
To the camera?
Yeah.
See, that is a bit more theatre-y, isn't it, to do that?
Because when you watch, say, Oscar Wilde or Kenneth Branagh in their Hamlet films, they always find a way to dance around the fourth wall breaking.
Right. Okay.
Because you got to remember, you know, these things were written for the stage, and in 1600, that it would have been a guy on the stage talking to the people down in the Globe Theatre, like talking to people standing up.
Yes. Yeah.
And saying these things and pondering them, and it's almost like asking a question.
Well, maybe that makes it more authentic to the Shakespeare experience then. Is that because he's directly questioning you on your thoughts on.
And I think that's vital to the character of Hamlet. There's a theater practitioner. She's a voice practitioner, but she's excellent at Shakespeare. Her name's Patsy Rodenberg, and she defined 3 different circles for performing Shakespeare, and indeed she's extended this to all of her work as well, not just Shakespeare, but it's very useful for Shakespeare. And she's defined these 3 circles of energy, first, second, and third. And first energy is the first circle of energy is it's very introverted, and you're very closed off, and you're not really sending any of your energy or your kind of ether, your what's the word, your chi out into the ether, as it were. And then the third circle of energy is, that's like Hamlet's uncle, and so much energy. When you walk in a room, you are the one filling that room with energy before anyone else. You're the first person to speak. You may actually force some people to go from second circle into first, or third into first. It's almost oppressive.
Right.
And then the trick about Hamlet is Hamlet should always be played in the second circle. And the second circle is all about survival. Because the second circle is, you don't want to have to fall into the first circle, but then you need to protect yourself, and you don't want to make yourself vulnerable by being in the third.
Right.
So if Hamlet was in the third circle, he'd walk out on stage and he would be like, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to get revenge on my dad.
And then
on my uncle,
bang,
sorry, yeah. And then
dead,
bang, he's dead.
Yeah.
Or, and in the first circle, he would come out and be like, I can't do this. I don't have the strength. This is the end. And maybe he'd commit suicide.
But
he's in the, but he's definitely in the second circle. He comes out and he says to the audience, to be or not to be, that is the question. And he's constantly in that survival mode. And you can tell when an actor is performing in either first or third. Like Andrew Scott was definitely in first. There was no survival instinct in his characterization. Benedict Cumberbatch was definitely in third. He was coming out all Sherlocky, yeah, I'm Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. I know you've killed my dad. Prepare to die. And so just, it doesn't, those kind of performances don't line up with the language, which to me is very second circle. And then David Tennant comes along, and that moment where he leans on the wall and then his eyes just shift like an inch and stare right at us, right through the lens. And he just says, to be or not to be, that is the question. And that's it. That's the tweet. That is the tweet. So there we go, really.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there. Our resident theatre expert.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I know I talk a lot about, I think it's important that just Shakespeare in general gets represented a lot more. Because here's the number one rule about Shakespeare. You're not going to enjoy Shakespeare if you're stuck in a classroom reading it.
Yeah.
You've got to be on your feet. You've got to be performing it. And so, yeah, I just think that this was a great version to show and share with people and bring awareness to, because I think it's theatre, but it's disguised as film, and that might make people watch it a bit more.
That's true.
So here we are. Yeah, there we go.
So what films have we got left, Joe?
So next week we are going to be talking about, I've just got the calendar here. So our festival, Shoal, Britannia, is going to be wrapping up next week with Quadrophenia, which is perhaps another cash grab, money grabbing music film by The Who. And then quite a recent film, actually, on Wednesday the 7th. That's going to be The Dig, with fulfilling Charlie's Lily James love.
Obsession.
I wasn't going to say it. And then we are going to be wrapping up on Friday the 9th. So next week's episode will be arriving on Monday the 12th of July. So stay tuned for that, where we'll be wrapping up this festival. So we do hope you've enjoyed this week's worth of films, just 3 films this week. If you wanted to catch episode 1, you can do that right now. Go listen to us talk very depressingly about some very bleak northern British films.
Really selling it there, mate.
Yeah, I know. But once again, this has been Joe from the Shoal Weekly Podcast. Do give us a follow on some of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you can subscribe to us on YouTube as well if you want to listen to our podcasts for free. Otherwise, continue to listen on Spotify with your premium plan, and we will catch you next week. Cheers. Thank you.